Okay, so for the last two sessions of this course, I will give you the talk I gave at the BIMSA member seminar. So I will give this talk. I will go a little bit slower than what I did during this seminar to explain all the details. And as I said, I will also cover the extra slide which was not covered during the seminar. So there will be new content also here. So what's the point of this? Talk? So I think it's a good way to finish the semester, because this talk provide all the motivation why study simple integral fusion category. So the goal of this talk is to explain in what sense it's interesting and important to study such category. And in fact, the course of this semester was mainly motivated by this this study. So it's very it will provide a lot of motivation for the course. So the first, let me answer this question directly with the second slide. The slogan why to study such category. In fact, the main motivation is to find exotic integral quantum symmetries. So I will explain what I mean by quantum symmetries. So this exoticness is represented by this alien here. So the point here is we don't really know exotic integral quantum symmetry. So we know a lot of integral quantum symmetry, for example, group theory or quantum group. The known quantum group are already integral quantum symmetry or finite group. By exotic one, we will explain that we mean not coming from group theory. All the known finite dimensional quantum group come from group theory in some sense. They are group theoretical in some specific sense. And we are looking for non-group theoretical quantum symmetry, integral quantum symmetry. So as I said, there are two important adjectives here. So we know exotic quantum symmetry. For example, you have quantum symmetry coming from extended Higgs group fusion category. For today, there is no model for that. It's an exotic quantum symmetry. We know a lot of integral quantum symmetry. What is not known today is exotic integral quantum symmetry. And so the discovery of such symmetries will be, as depicted here, will be as meeting an alien, because it will be like discovering a new area of mathematics completely unknown. So you can see exotic integral quantum symmetry as mathematical alien. So we don't know whether this exists or not. So if it exists, then we are very happy. If we can prove it does not exist, then it will be still an excellent result, because it's related to one of the most important open problems in fusion category theory. But of course, it will be less exciting. It will be much more interesting. The existence of such exotic integral quantum symmetry will be much more exciting than is non-existence. Okay, so so exotic integral quantum symmetry, we will explain all these adjectives. Exotic integral quantum symmetry. So the first adjective we need to explain here is what is symmetry. What is symmetry? Okay, so you take an object, and some abstract object in mathematics, for example, a geometrical object or something else, and a symmetry for this object is a transformation which preserves it. So this is very large definition. And the set of such symmetry form a group. Okay. So example, consider this geometric object, so a triangle, a regular triangle. And for the transformation, we consider isometry. So here, the symmetric group of the triangle is the set of isometries, preserving the triangle. So the set of these isometry are depicted here. So you have 6 isometry preserving the triangle. So A1, the reflection for this line, reflection for this line, A2, A3, and you have 3 rotation. The identity rotation, R, this rotation, and R square, this rotation. So you have 6 isometry preserving the triangle. And of course, you can compose this transformation. So usually when you compose, you use this symbol, but because you consider the group set, we use this symbol. So if you compose, for example, I don't know, A1 with A2, A1, A2, you get R2. So A1, this one, this reflection, and then this reflection is the same thing as doing that, etc., etc. So this table, the set of such transformation form a group. And in the next slide, we will a little bit generalize this notion of group. In fact, we will generalize the notion of finite group. But what do we mean by group here? We have a neutral element, such that when you multiply, you get exactly the same thing on the left and on the right. You get an inverse for every element. You get an element such that when you multiply by it, you get the neutral, and it's the same on the left and the right. And it's associative, very important. When you do something like that, it's the same as doing something like that. So such tables are not always associative. You can find such what we call a Latin table, satisfy only 2 axioms of the group, but not the associative axiom. Anyway, so for the triangle, the isometric group is 6 elements, S3. So the symmetry group, what's called the symmetry group S3. So in fact, why S3? Because in fact, the symmetry here is completely encoded by the permutation of this 3 points. There is one isometry preserving the triangle for every permutation of this 3. So that's why it's S3. So the goal here of this slide is to explain what is a symmetry. And we just provided a very broad, large definition and one example. So the goal here is not to provide a very precise definition, but in fact, the goal here is to understand that we started from a geometrical object, we started from a polytope, and we get a group, a finite group. But in fact, this work for every finite group, in the sense that every finite group is an isometric group of a polytope. So in some sense, in this specific framework of isometry, model for symmetry, the notion of symmetry here is essentially the same thing as the notion of group. So from now, when we think about symmetry, in fact, you can think about group. And this slide is here to explain in what sense group and symmetry are essentially the same notion. But essentially, it's not the same notion. It's essentially the same. You have to be careful. So, okay, so symmetry is essentially group. Now we want quantum symmetry. So now we want quantum symmetry. So if symmetry is essentially group, quantum symmetry, we can say, okay, it's essentially quantum group. But we will not do that. In fact, in our understanding, the notion of quantum symmetry is much larger than the notion of quantum group. The notion of symmetry is essentially the same thing as the notion of group, but the notion of quantum symmetry, there is an extra step. It is not just quantum group. So here, I mentioned quantum group, but quantum symmetry will be much larger than that. You can also mention the notion of algebra, the notion of tensor category, subfactor, planar algebra, etc. In fact, we will not start by this notion for quantum symmetry. In fact, we will, for quantum symmetry, for this slide, will be just a slight generalization of the notion of finite group. And we will see that, in fact, this small generalization of the notion of finite group will cover all this notion. In fact, what we are writing here, it's much easier than the definition of all this notion, but it's also much more general in some sense. Here, up to categorification, if you want to be more precise, up to categorification, this notion here is more general than all what is written here. Up to categorification or up to taking fiber functor or something like that. Anyway, in some sense, what we will define here, we will see that it is in fact the skeletal notion of every quantum symmetry. So here the idea is to slightly generalize the notion of finite groups. As we said, finite group, you have a neutral, you have inverse and associativity, as you can check on this table. So how to slightly generalize the notion of the axiom of finite group in order to cover this? In fact, we use the notion of fusion. So here, fusion, the idea of fusion is to is like the fusion of particles. So you have two particles here, they collide here, they fuse, and after the collision, you have plenty of new particles rising like that. And this is written like that. The fusion is the product, and the decomposition is all the new particle. And this is a new particle, and this is a multiplicity. So you have Nijk, new particle Bk, like that. So of course here, because this is a multiplicity, this number is an integer. It's a non-negative integer. Okay, so so here we will explain what are the axioms generalizing the axiom of group, and you will see it's very easy. So first, before generalizing the axiom of finite group, where is the finite group here? Because this is supposed to generalize the finite group. So where is the finite group in this? The final group case is like that. It is when this sum has only one summand. Only one summand means all these coefficients are 0 except for 1k, as it is written here. So you encode the indices by the group element, and you say that this is non-zero. In fact, it is 1 if only if k is GH. And so what you get is really a multiplication. So you have one element multiplied by one element of the basis, and you get only one element. So generalization here is you have a sum. Okay, but in fact, the axiom are almost the same as the axiom of final groups. You have associativity, it is the same. You have the unit, which is the same also. You have an anti-evolution generalizing the inverse, which is also almost the same as the inverse axiom. So we have to suppose here we wrote anti-involution, because if you just write involution, if you just write okay, I would just want a bijection on the set of indices such that when you apply it 2 times, it is identity. It's not enough. You really want anti-involution. Anti-involution here mean you have AB star equal B star A star. You need this. We need to encode this thing. So at the group level, you just have the notion of inverse, and if you are in a group, when you say that, you automatically has that. This is a consequence of the group axiom, this anti-involution aspect. Here, you need to assume it, because otherwise, in general, it's not true. If you don't assume it, you can have example of such structure without the anti-involution. Okay. So here the anti-involution is can be seen as a bijection on the set of indices, such that when you apply it 2 times, it's identity. And with this axiom, so it's like for the inverse, when you multiply the dual, called the dual by something, then it is 0 except for 1 when it is so you have something like that, n I star I 1 equal 1. So it's like for the inverse, and n I star j 1 equal 0 for j different from I star. So this is exactly from j different from I. So this is exactly what is written here. So as I said, these 3 axioms are really easy. It is easy. So much easier than the definition of quantum group, much easier than definition of algebra, of tensor category, etc. So in my opinion, it's really a good starting point. Of course, we will go beyond. Okay, so here we are talking about fusion ring. So before we have the notion of final group, now the notion of fusion ring. Here, these BI are just the basis. So you have a ring. It's in fact a free Z ring, and these BI are the basis of the ring. So fusion ring. The fusion ring is defined with a specific basis like that. So it's a Z ring with a specific basis satisfying this property. It's called a fusion ring. So it was introduced by Lustig in 1987. So here are the first example of such structure, such a fusion ring. So you have the group case. So the group case is a group, but as a ring, you can consider the group ring. So it's a Z ring, where the basis is just the element of the group. as written here. So the group ring is the easiest example, but you have a dual example, in fact, which come automatically. It is a character ring. So this, in some sense, this example is a little bit more interesting. The basis here are the irreducible character of the finite group. And when you multiply two irreducible characters, it decomposes like that. And in fact, it satisfies all these properties. So it's the character ring of a finite group is a fusion ring. And in fact, we will see later that there are many, many, many other fusion rings. And what we are interested in is exotic. And so, in fact, we will be interested in, we are not so much interested in this example because they are not exotic. We're interested of examples which are not of this form. And there are many examples which are not of this form, but it's not enough to say they are not of this form. What we want, it's example which cannot be made which cannot be cooked from such example. You have such example, and you can also make some deformation, some tensor products, some things, you can apply some cohomology, etc. to make new example, but they are not essentially new. But we will explain that. And in fact, yeah. So, okay. So how? In fact, we will see that it's a little bit more deep than just this example, because you have also fusion ring, which are not exotic in the sense that I am talking about, coming from Lie group. So let me explain. In fact, you can make we explain what is quantum symmetry in the very basic sense of fusion ring. Now, we need to explain what is exotic and integral. So the example we provided here are integral. We will explain in what sense they are integral, but they are not exotic. But there are also non-integral example. So the next slide will provide non-integral example, but they will not be exotic also, in the sense we are interested in. Because, yeah. But anyway, in some sense, non-integral examples are not of this form and cannot come from this form. But most of the non-integral examples, we will explain that they can come from Lie group and Lie algebra. Some quotient or some. So we will see. First, what about non-integral example? So, in what sense an example is integral or non-integral? So, what is the definition of integral? In fact, you consider a fusion ring with its basis, as I said, the definition of fusion ring requests a basis. And you have this very important theorem, the Frobenius-Perron dimension, providing the notion of Frobenius-Perron dimension. Now, this theorem is due to Frobenius-Perron, and we use this theorem to define the notion of Frobenius-Perron dimension, denoted like that. So what is the statement of this theorem? It said that there is a unique star homomorphism from the fusion ring to the complex field, such that the image of the basis are positive. And star homomorphism here refer to the anti-involution. Okay, so there is a unique. So we will use this star morphism to define a dimension on the basis. So this D will be the definition of FPD. But in fact, you can get the Frobenius parent dimension of the basic element. I call that the basic element. You can get it directly. In fact, it is just the usual norm of the fusion matrices. So each basic element come with a matrix. So for example, Bi can be represented by this matrix J, in fact Kj, if you want. Kj. So the entry of the matrix. So you have a matrix like that, and in fact the norm, the usual matrix norm or operator norm of this fusion matrix is exactly, it's a theorem, it's exactly the Frobenius parent dimension of this basic element. Okay, and we define the Frobenius parent dimension of the full fusion ring as the sum of the square of the Frobenius parent dimension of the basic element. And here you recover, in fact, a formula. When you consider the character ring, here you recover a usual formula. In fact, the Frobenius parent dimension in the character, for a character ring, the basic elements are the irreducible character, and the Frobenius parent dimension are the degree. And we know in group theory that the sum of the square of the degree are exactly the order of the group. And so, in fact, the Frobenius parent dimension of the character ring is the order of the group. And you can do the same for the group ring. In fact, for the group ring, as I will explain here, it's 1 everywhere. So here you just sum, it's a sum of 1. So it's exactly the order of the group also. Anyway. So one important notion for a fusion ring is a notion of 1 Frobenius. Or you can see that called Frobenius type, or 1 Frobenius, or just Frobenius. Here, it just means that the quotient of the full Frobenius parent dimension of the fusion ring divided by the Frobenius parent dimension of some basic element is always an algebraic integer for all I. So this is not true in general for every fusion ring. So but this is true for character ring. This is true for group ring. This is true for, in fact, all. So we will see later that we will be interested in categorification of such structure as, so categorification of fusion rings we will see that it's fusion category, and in fact all the known fusion category satisfy this property. It's a very important open problem whether it's always true for fusion category. It's a generalization of Kaplansky's 6 conjecture of algebra. So it's unknown whether it is true for every fusion category, but it is known that it's not true for every fusion ring. There are plenty of fusion rings which are not 1 Frobenius. So, but we expect that this is true for every fusion category. So it makes sense to restrict to 1 Frobenius case. In fact, it's a very, very strong restriction. Okay, so it's very important. And the second notion, important notion here, is the notion of pointed. And pointed here means that the Frobenius parent dimension of every basic element is 1. And in fact, at the fusion ring level, pointed is exactly the same thing as saying that it's a group ring. A group ring is pointed, And every pointed fusion ring is a group ring. Because if every basic element has a Frobenius power dimension 1, then you can easily prove that the basis form a group. So it's just the fusion ring is just the group ring. Okay, so we will need the notion of rank of a fusion ring. The rank is just the order of the basis, and the type is just the sequence of Frobenius power dimension of basic element. So just the type is just like that, just a list of Frobenius power dimension of basic element. So the type in the pointed case is just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, etc. That many times. Okay, so what about the existence of? So we only provided example where the Frobenius power dimension of basic element are integer. But here, there is an example, the easiest example for which there is a basic element whose Frobenius power dimension is not an integer. It's called the golden fusion ring. And this golden fusion ring satisfies the fusion rule are called the Yang-Lee rules. So it is a rank 2. So you cannot make it smaller rank because rank 1 is only the trivial, because you have the neutral object. So if it is rank 1, it must be trivial. So rank 2. So rank 2, you have this, you take this rule. So this is a trivial element, and the second element, you need the rule for the second. So the square of the second element, basic element, is just the neutral plus itself. Okay. And if you apply the Frobenius power dimension to this equation, because the Frobenius power dimension is an homomorphism, a ring homomorphism, in fact, you recover exactly the famous equation x squared equal 1 plus x. And we know that the only positive root of this equation is the golden ratio, 1 plus square root of 5 over 2. So this fusion ring has a basic element of Frobenius power dimension, the golden ratio, which is not an integer. So it is the first example with a non-integral in the non-integral case. And here you see that this Frobenius power dimension is a notion of dimension. But there exists another mathematical object and another notion of dimension, the Hausdorff dimension, but with the same dimension. Here, the Frobenius power dimension is golden ratio. Here, the Hausdorff dimension is golden ratio. And it will be very nice to find a link between these two notions. In what sense this fractal object called the golden dragon is related to the golden fusion ring, because they have the same dimension. This has the same dimension than this. So there must be a way to connect these two things, and I will be very interested in finding such a way. Okay. So a fusion ring. So a fusion ring will be called integral when all the Frobenius power dimension of basic element are integer. So the group ring and the character ring are integral fusion ring. As I said here, it's integral because the Frobenius power dimensions of basic element are just the degree of the irreducible character, so it's an integer. And this one is not an integral fusion ring. So this is for integral. And now we need to define the notion of simple. So this notion of simple, as it is written here, generalize the notion of simple group. So a fusion ring is called simple if it admits no proper non-trivial fusion subring. And by fusion subring, the notion of fusion subring is involve a subset of the basis. Proper mean a proper subset, and non-trivial mean a subset we do not reduce to just the neutral element. So if there is no proper non-trivial subset of the basis which generate a fusion subring, a subset will generate a ring just by the there is two ways to generate. In fact, if you take the basis of a fusion ring here, you take a subset, and you can say you have two ways to generate because it's a ring. You have the multiplication and addition, and it's you have also it's a Z module, and here subring. I mean, a subring here is you have a subset of the basis, generating a ring as so there is a subring with this subset. It's a bit confused. So you have R, you have a subring R prime, and in fact this R prime is given by a subset of the basis, but not every subset of the basis defines a subring. Okay, because you have the multiplication, addition, and you have the Z module, etc. Anyway, any fusion subring is given by a subset of the basis. Anyway, by definition. So if there is no proper non-trivial fusion subring, it's called simple. And why it generalizes the notion of simple group? Because for the character ring, a character ring is simple if and only if the group is simple. So it's a theorem. And so you can say, what is the point of considering simple case here? Because the goal is to define exotic integral. In fact, we know, so now we know what is integral. It remains to define exotic. But it will be much natural and much easier at the fusion ring level to define what is exotic in the simple framework. Of course, you can define the notion of exotic integral beyond the simple framework, but it's a little bit more complicated. And in fact, it's hard to do that at the fusion ring level. You can do that at the categorical level. There is a notion of weakly group theoretical, and something which is integral at non-weakly group theoretical. In some sense, it's exotic integral, but at the fusion ring level, you can have a flavor of that, which is much easier using in the simple restriction. And in fact, this restriction makes sense. We will explain in what sense, in fact, the simple restriction, the simple case, may already cover all what we are looking for as exotic integral. Okay, so I will we will make the pause now, and I will continue after the pause. Pause. Okay, so I was a bit confused with the notion of simple, with the notion of subring, fusion subring. So during the pause, I found a very nice way to define that simply. So a fusion subring is a subset, is exactly the same thing as the subset of the basis, such that if you take two basic elements in this subset, for example, B prime, in the subset, then the product of that decompose with basic element in B prime. So in some sense, fusion subring is the same thing as a subset of the basis, which is stable by product up to decomposition, like that. So of course, hello, m'entend? So stable by the fusion product up to decomposition. This is the simplest way to define the notion of fusion subring. Okay, and the character ring is simple if and only if the group is simple. Yeah, in fact, you can see. It's in fact any fusion. With a theorem saying that a fusion subring of that, the fusion subring of that are in 1-1 correspondence with the character ring of this form. So in fact, any fusion subring of that is isomorphic to this character ring with N is a normal subgroup. So like that. So if there is no non-trivial proper, the fact there is no non-trivial proper subring is the same thing as no non-trivial proper normal subgroup. That's why it is the same as simple. You can ask why we generalize the notion of simple from the model of the character ring and not from the model of the group ring. But in fact, a group ring, so like that, is simple if and only if the group has here the subring of that are exactly the subgroup for exactly the same reason I explained in the notion of fusion subring. So the subgroup, and so a group which has no proper non-trivial subgroup is exactly a cyclic group of prime order. This is exactly the only group without proper non-trivial subgroup. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So in some sense, you have the notion of this generalize the notion of simple group if you consider this model. But if you consider this model, this generalize the notion of prime number. And we will see at the end of this slide that we will be interested in more carefully in the generalization of prime number. Okay, so the notion of simple group are classified. Here it's a representation, it's a pictorial representation of the classification of simple group, in fact, finite simple group. This representation, in fact, it mimic the representation of the periodic table of atoms you can see simple group as atom of group theory, of finite group theory, because of Jordan-Holder theorem. Any finite group can be decomposed as simple group. So the simple group are the building blocks of the finite group theories, are the atoms. That's why this representation makes sense. So you have three infinite family of finite simple group. You have the cyclic family. You have the alternating family. Here, cyclic group of prime order. The alternating group, alternating family, and the third family is the Lie type, the family of Lie type. And in this family, so it is well known, you have a subfamily of type A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like that. So the cyclic family, the alternating family, the family of Lie type, three infinite family, plus 26 extra group called the sporadic group. And the biggest one is the monster group. Okay, so this is very famous. This classification is very famous. There are plenty, and there are thousands of papers dedicated to the study of this group. In fact, this classification requires something like 10,000 pages of proof, and the proof was not checked from the beginning to the end by a single person. So some people are interested in encoding this proof to be checked by a computer to be sure that there is no mistake, because some people, even today, are not 100% sure that this proof is correct. There are something like 99.99% sure, but not 100%. So this requires a checking by computer. And anyway, so this is very important. And in fact, the notion of simple integral fusion ring, as defined here, covers the notion of finite simple group via character ring. In fact, even the character ring, in fact, the character ring of cyclic group is exactly the group ring of the cyclic group. So even for the cyclic group, is covered by the character ring. So the notion of simple integral fusion ring cover this classification. But in fact, it extends it because you have plenty of extra simple integral fusion ring which are not of this form. Not of this form. And we are specifically interested in simple integral fusion ring which are not of this form. This is what we will call here exotic. So from here, exotic for this slide, exotic integral quantum symmetry mean simple integral fusion ring, which is not the character ring of a non-abelian not the character ring of a group. Okay. Yeah. So we have our notion, what we are looking for, at least at the basic level. But this basic level is not sufficient to cover the notion of quantum symmetry as it is mentioned in the literature. In fact, quantum symmetry is more, from now, quantum symmetry will be more substantial than just fusion ring. you need something more. In fact, we classified the simple integral fusion ring for up to some bounded rank or bounded Frobenius bound dimension, and we found plenty of examples which are not of this class. But in fact, a group, you can provide it more structure than just you can get something more substantial from a group. You can get something called the representation category of the group. And there are much more, which is much deeper. So up to now, we were happy with quantum symmetry as fusion ring, but from now, okay, we are looking for something more. We did the classification. We classify that for a large rank, up to rank, I don't know, 11, or Frobenius per dimension up to, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000, etc. We found a lot of extra examples. And so the question is what to do with that? We have, in fact, there are so many examples, even with this assumption, that we cannot expect a priori a classification, a general classification like that, something so structured like that. In fact, there are so many new examples. It looks a little bit random, so we need more restriction. And in fact, so you see, okay, you have something here more. What do you want to do with that? And we want to do something with that. And we want to give it more substance. We want something more substantial. So the fusion ring as quantum symmetry is just the skeleton of a more substantial quantum symmetry. But as I said, it is, in my sense, the best starting point because it's so easy and so easy to classify. But it's not enough. Now we need to go beyond. We need something more substantial. So fusion ring here, as we said, the group ring, character ring, and a lot of new example, non-integral example, or even example here, simple integral fusion which are not of this, not on group-like form, represented in this box. And in fact, there is a categorification of a notion of fusion ring called the notion of fusion category. And we will not define in details what is a fusion category here. In fact, for people who follow the course of last semesters, I defined it in details. Just by example, but we will explain a little bit the categorical associativity involved in this notion. So the example, you have the group ring. What is the categorification of the group ring? It's called VecG, the category of vector space which are G-graded. So it's a category. You have a categorical structure here which is more substantial than that. The categorification of the notion of character ring is the notion of representation. So the category of representation of the group G, finite dimensional representation here. And in fact, the non-integral example we mentioned here admit also a categorification. We will explain here, in fact. So you have plenty of categorification. In fact, for example, if you have a fusion ring can have one categorification. For example, this one is a categorification. This one is a categorification of this one, but it can also have several categorifications. In fact, this one has several categorification denoted like that. You can add a 3 cocycle. So for every 3 cocycle of the finite group, you have a categorification. And you have a notion of equivalence for this 3 cocycle corresponding to the notion of categorical equivalence here. So you can really have different non-equivalent fusion category for that, given by the 3 cocycle up to equivalence. Okay. So you can have 1 categorification, several categorification, or you can have 0 categorification at all. Not all fusion rings admit a categorification as a fusion category. And in this box, I want to explain, to give the flavor why not all fusion rings admit a categorification. In fact, this is based on the notion of categorical associativity. So in the fusion ring, you have the associativity as defined here. This is the combinatorial algebraic associativity. But at the categorical level, you have a more substantial notion of associativity. So at the fusion ring level, the associativity is not, it is just an equality of 2 elements, this equal to that. At the categorical level, it's an isomorphism. So you have 3 objects of the category ABC, and the product, the fusion product is here it's generalized by the notion of tensor product. And you have A tensor B tensor C, or A tensor B tensor C. And there exists an isomorphism between, by definition of a monoidal category, you have an isomorphism between these 2 things. But in fact, you have something more substantial. You have a natural isomorphism. So a natural isomorphism is it's an isomorphism between 2 functors. Here, the functor A, B, C map to that or map to that. This is 2 functors, and alpha is an isomorphism between these 2 functors. And this natural isomorphism is encoded by this family of usual isomorphism between objects. But you have extra structure here because it's a natural transformation. So it's a transformation between 2 functors. You have lot of extra assumption for that to be. It's not enough to have a family of isomorphism like that. You need extra structure given by the notion of natural transformation. Okay, so you have this natural isomorphism. So let me mention that the notion of monoidal category is due to MacLean. There is a famous book, Category for Working Mathematician. So you already have the notion of natural transformation, but it's not enough. That should also satisfy the pentagon diagram, which is here. Where the natural isomorphism, here we did not write the indices to simplify, but in fact you have to write the indices. Here you have the alpha index A tensor B, C, D, for example. You can write it like that for something simpler. So it should satisfy the pentagon diagram. So you start from this tensor product of objects, and you apply this natural isomorphism, this one and this one, or you apply this one and this one. And in fact, the pentagon axiom says that these 2 isomorphisms are equal. In other words, the diagram commute. And this assumption is really strong. It's really, really strong. And what's the point of this you can see this as a way to remove the ambiguity, because you have two ways to get the same thing. So in some sense, it's a little bit ambiguous. When if you have a map from that to that, you don't know if you go like that or like that. In fact, the Pentagon axiom says that it is the same. There is no ambiguity. And you need to assume that, to have no ambiguity. Okay. And I said that this box will explain, we'll try to give the idea why not all fusion rings can be categorified, because the reason is the following. In monoidal category, there is a property called skeletal, there is a property called strict. So of course, not all monoidal categories are skeletal and not all monoidal categories are strict. But there are theorems, for example, MacLane strictness theorem, that's saying that every monoidal category is equivalent to a strict monoidal category. And it's true also that every monoidal category is equivalent to a skeletal monoidal category. But it's not true that every monoidal category is equivalent to a monoidal category which is both strict and skeletal. So it's not possible to have up to equivalence. It's not possible to have both. So there is a tension between these two notions. So what is skeletal? Skeletal means that, so a monoidal category is skeletal if when two objects are isomorphic, then they are equal. So skeletal means you reduce as much as possible the number of objects. If two objects are isomorphic, they are the same. And strict means that this natural isomorphism is trivial. So for all ABC, this isomorphism is the identity. This is isomorphic to this. But in fact, strict means that this is equal to this. Oh, sorry. And this morphism is identity. So this is isomorphic to this. And strict means this is equal to this, and this isomorphism is identity. Be careful, strict do not imply skeletal. You have something looking like skeletal in strict because you said that you already know that this is equivalent to this, and by strict definition, say this is equal to this. But this equality among two isomorphic objects is only true for this case in the definition of strict, not for every isomorphic object. So there is a tension between, in fact, there is a tension between strict and skeletal. You cannot have both in general. And that is why, because if you can have both, assume you can have both in general, then every fusion, because the notion of fusion ring, in fact, as I said, is the skeleton of the notion of fusion category. So in some sense, fusion ring represents skeletal. But if you can have skeletal and also strict, then everything is trivial. You can directly go there trivially. It's not true in general. You can have both, but there is example of fusion ring for which you can have both. It's in fact this fusion ring, this fusion category is equivalent to a strict and skeletal monoidal category. In fact, this one is not strict and skeletal a priori, but it is equivalent to something strict and skeletal. But this one, in general, this is not true for this one, in fact. In general, for a finite group, this is not true that this is strict and equivalent to something strict and skeletal. Why? Because, in fact, there is a theorem saying that a monoidal category is, so a fusion category is equivalent to a fusion category which is strict and skeletal, if a fusion category is equivalent to a fusion category which is strict and skeletal, then it is of multiplicity 1. And multiplicity 1 means the multiplicity is the max of the fusion coefficient. And this is of multiplicity 1, but in general, this is not of multiplicity 1. And multiplicity 1 is not sufficient, but it's necessary to be equivalent to both strict and skeletal. Anyway, so this notion is really more substantial than just, so the tensor product in a monoidal category, and in particular the associativity, is much more substantial than the fusion product here and the usual associativity. And the main point is here. Okay. As I said, this is really, it's a big constraint. So here, one example of categorification. In fact, we generalize a bit this example, but here we allow, you put n non-negative. You get this example like that. And in fact, this fusion ring can be categorized as a fusion category if and only if n equals 0 or 1. N equals 0 is just a trivial case. I guess this is just rep of C2, which is the same thing as vec of C2. But 1 is a non-integral fusion category. And yeah, so this example, as I said, can be categorized. So there are something really substantial here. You can find this example, you can make this example more substantial than just a ring. And as I said, maybe, so what is the connection between this category and the golden dragon fractal before? Will be very interesting in getting a connection, a deep connection between these two notions. Anyway, so now we are looking for categorification of simple integral fusion ring, not of this form. This is what, with our new notion, with our more substantial notion of quantum symmetry, so we upgraded what we called quantum symmetry. Now a quantum symmetry is a fusion ring admitting a categorification, so a fusion category in some sense. That's level 2. Now, what about the existence of exotic? Well, what about the existence of exotic integral like that? So categorification of something here out of this table. Okay, so here, let me explain. As I said before, we don't need simple to define exotic. In fact, simple, you can define it something which is beyond weakly group theoretical at the integral level. But in fact, it's an open problem whether something like that exists. So consider these 3 statements. Each of these statements are open. We don't know if it is true. In fact, so I don't know if it is true or not. I hope, as I said, it will be much more exciting if they are false. Because if they are false, then this will mean the existence of this mathematical alien. But let me explain in more details. First statement, first open statement, every integral fusion category is weakly group theoretical. So weakly group theoretical, there is a precise definition, but before reading it, let me say that weakly group theoretical means that you can cook, in some sense, the category from finite group theory. This is the meaning of weakly group theoretical. And so this statement, this open statement, says that every integral fusion category can be cooked from finite group theory. More precisely, weakly group theoretical means Morita equivalent to a sequence of group extension from the trivial category. So you start from the trivial category and you make group extension. So group extension, etc. What you get here is not a group ring or a character ring, but it's something more general, but coming from a group extension. So you have the notion of group extension in the group framework, and this notion of group extension, you have more extension for a group in the fusion categorical level. A group defines more extension than only the extension which at the end it's a group. But it's still a group extension. So this is in that sense, it can be cooked from group theory. So a sequence of group extension in that sense. And also Morita equivalent. So Morita equivalent here means that they are the same Drinfeld center. So we did not define what is Drinfeld center, but yeah. Weakly group theoretical. Okay. So WGT for weakly group theoretical. So the first statement says that every integral fusion category is weakly group theoretical. The second statement is a particular case of the first. He is saying that every simple integral fusion category is weakly group theoretical. So of course, one implies two trivially, but the question is it true that two imply one? So if you assume that to be true at the simple level, can you deduce it is true in general? It's not known. In fact, we ask this question here. Well, this open problem was stated here. In fact, in this in a paper by Ettinghoff, Nitschisch, Ostrich, they ask whether this first statement is false. Okay. And in fact, to motivate the simple case, in fact, they proved also that a simple, non-pointed, because pointed, we already know that pointed is completely classified the pointed case. But the non-pointed weakly group theoretical simple integral fusion, simple fusion category is exactly of this form. So note that in fact, weakly group theoretical imply integral, so we don't need to assume integral here. And we put non-pointed to simplify here, because otherwise you can just say a weakly group theoretical simple fusion category is equivalent to that. Because of, in fact, the problem of this kind of example, vec G omega is not equivalent to vec G in general. But if you consider only the non-pointed case, you can just say it's equal. So they are proof that any non-pointed weakly group theoretical simple fusion category is exactly of this form. And as I said, we are interested in something which is not of this form. So we're interested in something which is not weakly group theoretical. So at the simple level, not weakly group theoretical is exactly the same thing as saying not of this form. So wait a minute. Okay. So slide 8. Okay. But there is a third. There is a third open statement. Every simple integral modular fusion category is pointed. And in fact, we proved that this is equivalent. Wait. This is equivalent to this. 2 is equivalent to 3. And when you had, so if you're interested in this statement, in the simple, assume that we prove that is equivalent to that, then we only need to consider the modular case, and we no more need to consider weakly group theoretical. In fact, we just need to deal with modular and pointed. The statement said every simple integral modular fusion category is pointed. The open statement. And we are looking for example, counterexample to this statement or to this statement. Okay. In fact, we proved that there is no counterexample for this statement up to for rank less than 13, which is quite large, in fact, for classification. In fact, we classified all the integral modular fusion category. In fact, more precisely, all the integral modular data for rank less than 12, less than 13. And we found no simple example, which are non-pointed. So all the simple examples we found are pointed. Okay, so now let me explain a little bit what I mean by modular. Because we say, okay, we can restrict to the modular case, and then we simplify a lot because we no more need weakly group theoretical. And weakly group theoretical is a little bit complicated. What is modular? In fact, modular involves a categorical commutativity. It's more than that. So we define the categorical associativity here. Now we need to introduce the categorical commutativity. So categorical commutativity is more substantial than just commutativity. So commutativity at the fusion ring level is just B1, B2 equal B2, B1. At the categorical level, as before, you have isomorphism and you have natural transformation, natural isomorphism. So you have the functor, this functor like that, or this functor like that, and there exists a natural isomorphism between these two functors called C, given by this family of isomorphism. So you have the structure of natural transformation and also an extra structure called hexagon diagram. So it's the same idea as the pentagon diagram. Same idea in the sense that it's to remove ambiguity, but it's hexagon diagram. So I did not draw the hexagon diagram. But the same idea, just to remove the ambiguity. You have two ways to go from one point to another point. And the hexagon diagram says that these two ways are the same morphism. Okay. Okay, so now this notion, this natural isomorphism is called the braiding. And with such a braiding, you can define a matrix when you restrict the entry to the simple object, you get a matrix like that. So this matrix is a trace of this morphism. So this morphism is depicted like that. So you start from two objects, in fact, two simple objects, X and Y, in the category. and you apply the braiding. And the braiding is depicted with such a picture. A braiding, like a braiding when you consider knot theory. A braiding, and you apply again the braiding. You have a double braiding like that. And the trace is just doing something like that, to apply some string like that. So this defines the entry of the S matrix. And in fact, you can see pictorially, you can just see this trace like that as just something like that. It's just, you have something like that. This is just a number given for these two ring, one in the other like that. So this is the entry of the S matrix. And here, to get the notion of modular, in fact, there are two extremal cases for braiding. One extremal case is called symmetric, and the other extremal case is called modular. So why? And these two are opposite in some sense, because in fact symmetric here mean that in fact you have this double braiding is just the identity. So you braid one time, you braid another time, and in fact symmetric means this is exactly the same thing as just doing that, which is the identity. And the trace of that is just the dimension, the Frobenius parent dimension of X times the Frobenius parent dimension of Y. And in fact, this is equivalent to say that the entry of the S matrix is just like that. And in fact, this symmetric is the rank of such matrix. When you have this property, the rank is as small as possible. The rank of the matrix compared to the rank of the category. The rank of the matrix is as small as possible when it is symmetric. In opposite, for a given rank of a fusion category, the rank is exactly the rank of the category. The rank of the matrix is the rank of the category. In other words, it is invertible. In the modular case, so we have to mention two very famous people. For symmetric, we should mention Deligne, because in fact, Deligne proved that a symmetric fusion category, a symmetric braiding fusion category is essentially the same thing as RepG, whereas and modular is opposite to symmetric. That is why when you assume modular here, you say that weakly group theoretical in the simple case is the same as that, which is symmetric. So that's why you have this equivalence. In the simple case, modular, you completely, in the modular non-pointed, it's completely out of all what is related to group theory. Finite group theory. In fact, not group theory, but finite group theory, because if you are not in the integral case, you can get example of modular tensor category, fusion category coming from Lie group, Lie algebra, in fact. But they are non-integral. But we don't know simple integral modular fusion category, which are non-pointed up to now. It's a very important open problem. So we will continue tomorrow. It's almost time. Let me finish today by this line, because there are much more things to say about modular tensor category. It's a very, very important notion, which was initially developed, say, by Moore and Seidberg in 1989. And there are many, many things to say. So not all fusion category or not all monoidal category are braided, but you can make a braided braided monoidal category, a braided fusion category from a fusion category by taking the Drinfeld center. So you have a fusion category which is not necessarily braided, but if you apply the Drinfeld center, what you get is a braided. As we said, braiding generalizes the notion of commutativity, and the center is for example, you have a group. You take the center. If the group is non-commutative, the center is commutative, abelian. But be careful here. The Drinfeld center is not a fusion subring. It is not a fusion subcategory of the category. It is something. It may be bigger. It may be in the symmetric case, in the braided case. In fact, this contain the initial category. But if it is not braided, then in fact they are not connected. There is a functor, there is a forgetful functor, etc. But one is not isomorphic to something included in the other. Okay, so this is very important notion. I will not develop in the rest of the paper. The notion of modular tensor category is very important as a geometric invariant. This is called topological quantum field theory. As I said, there are plenty of examples of simple monoidal, of simple modular fusion category which are non-pointed, coming from Lie theory, but none of them are integral. None of them, which is quite strange, in fact. So it's really open. You have plenty of examples like that without integral, but we don't know, like that, but we don't know one which is integral. One very famous notion here is the notion of vertex operator algebra. In fact, the notion of vertex operator algebra, the representation category of a vertex operator algebra is essentially a modular category. And the last very important point before stopping today is that from a modular category, modular tensor category, we can provide representation of SL2Z. In fact, more precisely, projective representation. SL2Z is a modular group. That's why this is called modular category, because it provides projective representation of the modular group. In fact, you get the modular group. One generator of the modular group is S matrix here, and one other generator is called the T matrix. It's a twist, and this T and S generate the modular group. Now this provides a representation, more precisely, projective representation. Anyway, so there are plenty of things to say about modular category. We will not develop tomorrow. So, okay, so we can stop here and see you tomorrow to finish.